Have you ever thought about what makes someone a real hero? Is it always about being the strongest or the loudest? Well, today we're going to talk about a very different kind of hero. Someone who changed the world not with a sword or with shouting, but with quiet kindness. Let's get into it.
But before we dive in, I've got a question for you. How could you possibly solve a huge, massive problem, like making sure everyone has enough to eat or taking care of people who are sick, with just a small act of kindness? It sounds kind of impossible, doesn't it? Well, stick with me, because the stories we're about to explore have a surprising answer.
All right, so let's start by meeting this hero. And like I said, he's different. This isn't about capes and super strength. This is about a quiet kind of power. And you'll see, it's something that's way more powerful in the end.
So try to picture what it was like back then. A lot of the important leaders, well, they were all about being seen. They'd have these loud arguments right in the middle of the street, and they made a really big show of their prayers so everyone would notice them. But Jesus was the total opposite. He was quiet, he was gentle, he wasn't trying to get applause or prove he was the smartest guy in the room. He was just there to help.
And that quiet desire to help, it was about to face a massive test. Our next story takes us to a town called Capernaum, where they were dealing with a really big problem. Sickness was everywhere.
Yeah, this problem was just enormous. It all started with just one healing. See, Jesus helped his friend Peter's mother-in-law get better. And you know how it is? Word travels fast, like wildfire fast. All of a sudden, it seemed like the whole town knew, and every single person who was sick started to hope maybe he could help them too.
Okay, just look at this timeline. It's just incredible. It started on the Sabbath day with that one healing. But because of the religious rules, people waited until the sun went down. And then the entire city showed up at the door. Can you even imagine that? He stayed up all night long helping every single person who came to him. It wasn't until just before the sun came up that he finally found a quiet moment for himself.
And this quote right here, it just says it all. Not until the last sufferer had been relieved did Jesus cease his work. Just let that sink in for a second. He didn't stop. He didn't say, okay, I'm tired, that's enough for tonight. He kept going until the very last person who needed him was taken care of. Now that is a truly powerful kind of love. All right, so healing a whole town, that's pretty huge, right? But what if the problem was even bigger? What if you had a massive, hungry crowd, and you were stuck in the middle of nowhere? Well, that's exactly what our next story is about. A picnic for 5,000. You know, the number itself is just mind-boggling. 5,000. But get this, that was just counting the men. That number didn't even include all the women and children who were there. So just imagine how big that crowd really was. We're talking massive. So you've got this enormous crowd of hungry people, and Jesus' friends, the disciples, go looking for food. And what do they find? This: 5 little loaves of bread and 2 small fish. That's it. I mean, that's barely a lunch for one family, and they needed to feed thousands.
Seriously, just put yourself there for a minute. You see this huge crowd of people, and then you see this tiny little lunch. Would you think that was enough to feed everyone? No way, right? It must have felt completely impossible.
But Jesus, he was so calm. He didn't panic. He just told everyone to sit down in the grass to get organized. Then he took that little bit of food, looked up to heaven, and he gave thanks for it. Then he simply broke the bread and fish and handed it to his disciples to pass around. And this is where something amazing happens. As the disciples are handing out the food, it just doesn't run out. It keeps multiplying right there in their hands. And we're not talking a little snack. Everyone ate until they were completely stuffed, as much as they wanted.
And if you need any more proof, check out this number, 12. After thousands of people had eaten their fill, the disciples collected the leftovers, and they filled 12 whole baskets. It wasn't just enough food. There was way more than enough.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, there are 2 parts. First, Jesus made sure nothing was wasted, which is why they gathered all the leftovers. And second, it's a huge lesson for us. Always share what you have. Because even if it feels like a little, when you use it to help others, it can become more than you could ever imagine. Okay, so for our final story, we're going to look at a different kind of problem. We've seen Jesus care for the sick and the hungry. Now we're going to see how he treated people who were often ignored back then, kids. This is about the problem of being seen as small. So here's the scene. A bunch of mothers were bringing their children to Jesus, hoping he would just bless them. But his own disciples, they thought this was a waste of his time. They figured he was too important to be bothered by a bunch of kids, so they actually tried to shoo them away.
But Jesus saw what was happening, and he had a completely different idea. He stopped his friends and said these famous words, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of God." He was basically saying, let the children come to me. Don't you dare stop them. The kingdom of God is for people with hearts just like theirs.
And he didn't just say it, he showed it. He told his disciples they were wrong, then he welcomed the children, took them right into his arms, and he blessed each and every one of them. For Jesus, these kids weren't an interruption. In that moment, they were the most important people in the world.
So we've heard 3 pretty incredible stories. One about sickness, one about hunger, and one about feeling small. So what do they all mean when you put them together? Let's connect the dots and see what the big idea is.
It all boils down to this. In the first story, the problem was sickness, and the lesson is to take care of everyone's needs. In the second, the problem was hunger, and the lesson is to share what you have even if it doesn't seem like much. And in the third, the problem was being pushed aside, and the lesson is that every single person is important and deserves to feel welcome.
So the biggest lesson of all is this. Jesus' true power wasn't shown in some big, flashy, look-at-me kind of way. He showed his great power by quietly and lovingly taking care of people's real, everyday problems.
And that brings us right back to our first question. So now it's your turn to think. What are your 5 loaves and 2 fish? What are the small things you have that you can share? Maybe it's your time, a kind word, a special talent you have, or even just a smile. What's something small you can do to help someone else?
Because if these stories teach us anything, it's this. You don't have to be a king or a superhero to make a huge difference. Small acts of kindness, when they come from the heart, truly have the power to change the world. Thanks for tuning in.